Marvel Rivals has released 2 new heroes, and there's a lot of interesting questions about what these heroes function in moving forward. Today we're going to be looking at both Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman. Now, for those of you looking for the quick answer, my quick thoughts, I really think that these are solid designs with some questions of how they fit into the larger landscape of Marvel Rivals, but overall 2 thumbs up for me. Today we're going to be taking a look at my positive things with Mr. Fantastic, some of the criticisms about Mr. Fantastic, and I'm going to be doing the same with Invisible Woman as well. Finally, we'll be summing up with my expectation for hero releases from Marvel Rivals moving forward. Mr. Fantastic is the duelist that really functions as a hybrid of tank, support, and duelist. He's going to be giving teammates shields, baiting attention, absorbing threat, and obviously looking for pressure in the meantime. There's a lot of dynamics with how this character is played. There's a lot of different choices about what you can be doing with pretty much all of your abilities, which I found very, very engaging. Initially looking at some of his gameplay examples, it looked interesting, but it wasn't necessarily something that I thought would be all that thoughtful. But upon getting on game, I actually found him to be one of the more thoughtful and more challenging DPS that I've ever played. There's a lot of choice with how you can be repositioning yourself with your E. You can go and help your teammates, you can go and help your tank, and because you have 2 of them, you can actually go back and peel for your backline and then go right back to the front line immediately afterwards. And then you can also use it to combo on DPS on the enemy team or tanks on the enemy team. All of this is obviously done to build resource so that you go to your mega form, which then allows you to pretty comfortably frontline brawl as long as you're playing your cover. And this is not even factoring the boops, the pulls, and even obviously the block ability as well. Overall, I found him incredibly thoughtful and very engaging to play. And it also really fits the hero fantasy of what the character is supposed to do, which is absolutely wild to me to see in a third-person shooter. I will say that I did have difficulty oftentimes feeling the impact of what I was doing in many situations. Felt like I couldn't contribute as much damage, as much pressure as I'd like, which is more of the design of the character. But I do think that a lot of people that may not fully understand what he can provide indirectly are going to feel like they're really not doing all that much. It often reminds me of like you can't carry a game with Mercy in Overwatch, and I feel like people are going to have similar thoughts about this character. This is typical of a utility character, especially a utility DPS, but the question is the utility of repositioning, shields, frontline going to be enough for people to enjoy playing the character? I think so, but that is a question that needs to be answered. I could see him also functioning as a triple tank hybrid cleave, playing with 2 other tanks. I noticed that when I had a competent and strong tank line, I felt like my resources and capabilities were amplified. Mr. Fantastic can't really fit in as a solo tank. He is a supplement to a tank or to a tank line, but if you put him on a tank as his own, he just kind of melts. Now that's all the good things, but the bad things is I think there's some major quality of life issues with many of the transformations. I think going into your block with your shift, which is the whatever that is. I think coming out of that, there's some delays. Obviously, going into your mega form takes some time. Coming out of that mega form takes some time. And honestly, even going in and out of your ultimate takes some time. I felt like every little transformation in this fast passive a game, those transformations weren't happening fast enough. And I would often die mid-transformation, even just after a couple of games. It was really frustrating to feel like I was making the right decisions with balancing my cooldowns, but I was always getting caught in that transformation if I mismanaged even for a slight second. I've heard that they're speeding up some of these transformations, and I hope that that's enough to fix some of these issues. I also had some occasional bugs with having to press Q multiple times for my ultimate and go off, shift canceling as well accidentally. I think this is more to do with the servers and less to do with the character, but it's going to be very frustrating with this character. And I will say, maybe my biggest bone to pick with this character is the forced transformation into Mega Mode. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, it's a skill issue, it's resource management, but the problem with that is that you build that elasticity when you're actually doing things. And so, unlike normal resource management where you have to spend your resources where you want to do, if you don't want to transform at the wrong time, then you're just not allowed to do really anything. Using your shields, even just simply doing damage, builds elasticity, which means that oftentimes if you don't want your mega form just yet because you're waiting for a specific moment to cleave frontline, then you're just not allowed to poke. You're not allowed to do any damage whatsoever, and that feels a bit odd. I'm not sure how I would want this to be implemented, but it feels like even if they had an option for you to be able to build the resource and then have it decay if you didn't use it, similar to Doctor Strange, even that would feel a little bit better. As it is now, I often find myself having to cancel the elasticity, having to cancel the mega form because I built too much elasticity, and that's just such a big bummer. And it's even a bigger bummer when we talk about the ultimate, because people complaining about the ultimate and the damage that it does, I actually am going to be a bit of a hot take here. I think the damage is honestly okay. Not every ultimate needs to be a big AoE one-shot. It is interesting, it's fun, it's unique, it's silly, and it does pretty decent pressure over a sustained period of time. My biggest complaint is the fact that you can't really do it in any mid-plus elo unless you're in mega form, because you're big in the form, and yet you're only 350 HP unless you went into the ultimate in mega form. So not only is it difficult to manage your mega form because you're forced to burn resources or forced to build it to do anything, but then if you don't ult while you have mega form, you just die, and you just die immediately, especially because your hitbox is bigger in that form, as if you're in mega form. Even if you're not, it's not great. The other annoying thing for me as well is that you need that third slam to actually continue all the way to 6. So if it does get blocked, well, half the value, even more, of your ultimate is just completely gone. I think the ultimate design is really cool. I don't really have a lot of critiques, but again, it's more of the execution of these really cool ideas that I would love to see done a little bit better. Overall, I think they did a really good job of making a very creative and surprisingly thoughtful DPS, breaking barriers for what a hybrid character can be, and I hope that they continue to do this moving forward. Next up, let's talk about Invisible Woman. I freaking love her utility. The question is, she rewarded enough for proactivity and angling? I think some of her boops and sucks and a lot of her kit just feels super solid. The repositioning slow, the boop with choices that often requires a lot of quick decision making, and the management of her repositioning healing shield really feels cool. The fact that even her own self-heal takes a bit of dedicated thought is also really nice. The problem that I've had initially from playing this character is that it did feel like I spent a lot of time healing. Generally, her selfish damage pressure is relatively low compared to even other supports, with an emphasis on cleave damage. For example, her damage is half of her healing output, and there's no option to headshot either, which is fine. I think that the way that she does damage is definitely unique, but it definitely felt like more often than not, if I wasn't getting good value of my utility, then I was more often than not just gonna be spamming heals, AoE, cleave, heal on my team. The range of your damage is also limited to 30 meters, which is a little shorter than you'd think. I had some thoughts from some of my viewers and from my friends that were telling me, well, maybe it should be her job to go support an angle, similarly to how a Kiriko might function in Overwatch. But I had difficulty often keeping up with flankers, as aside from your jump, which tragically often isn't high enough to reach a lot of high grounds in the game, you lack mobility and you lack speed. It's often very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to keep up with the flankers in this game. So even if you can support from angles and can defend yourself with your boops and your self-heal and your invisibility, you often just can't get to the positions that you want, and certainly can't get there fast enough. Oh, and sadly, we have an ult that looks really cool, but that often just functions as yet another AoE sustain ult with a fancy frill. Its invisible utility is cool, but honestly, 165 healing per second is, well, useful. Overall, I really enjoyed managing her kit, but as common with rivals, for my personal preference with the support, I found myself less capable of taking and making space or even supporting angles that I would have liked. To be clear, this is my preference. Rival has their own clear vision of supports that are focused more on healing, less focused on taking space, and if you like that style of support, Invisible Woman's really thoughtful kit will likely be something you really enjoy, especially compared to the more boring utility of a lot of the other supports. And that about wraps it up. Overall, while I personally don't always jive with the balance design of this game, Rivals has released another 2 heroes that have unique, fun, and clever kits that I think you'll all enjoy. To me, this also shows the depth and the value of having even more complex kits that just gives you so many more choices. I think the most fun aspect of both Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic was the amount of thinking that I had to do, even as an old Hero Shooter veteran. There felt like there were so many choices and so many situations where I felt not necessarily overwhelmed, but just excited about the number of options that I could have done and the different choices that I could have made. Honestly, that's a really good feeling.